You're listening to India Bio Speaks, your one-stop resource for science, news and careers. Hello and welcome everyone to our next episode on crafting your career in science. As a part of the informational interview series, I'm happy to have with me here a very interesting, multi-talented and a super fun friend, Sarah Iqbal. Sarah is currently the lead for communications and public engagement at the Wellcome Trust DBT India Alliance. Interestingly, Sarah did her PhD from the University of Oxford and her postdoc at Scripps, Florida. She then transitioned to a career in science communication, outreach, and public engagement with the India Alliance. Today, we'll together explore her unique career story. Welcome to our show, Sarah.
Thank you for inviting me, Lakshmi.
Sarah, so tell us, when and how did you decide to switch from a science career at the bench to one that takes it beyond the bench?
I didn't really have a light bulb moment, Lakshmi. However, I was very clear from early on that the skills that I will gain during PhD, postdoc, can very well be applied outside academic research and in other careers in science. I actually really enjoyed my time at the bench and learned a lot of transferable skills as a researcher. Even while I was a researcher, I was passionate about making science accessible and communicating to a large set of people. As scientists, I often felt that we were not doing this enough. And who better than scientists themselves to share authentic information in a language that is accessible? So I did a lot of science outreach while in the UK and the US where I trained. Even in these countries, outreach was happening to a lesser extent than one would have hoped for. And they were happening even lesser in India then. So I saw that as a necessity and an opportunity to contribute.
That sounds great, Sarah. How then did you get your current position at the India Alliance?
So Lakshmi, while I was completing my postdoc, I looked for organizations to work for back home in India in the space of science communication and outreach. And to begin with, I did not really know if such roles even existed or what they would be titled. So I began by looking for organizations that I could potentially have these roles. And it was during this process that I found a Wellcome Trust DBT India Alliance, and I identified with the work culture and values of this organization. And then on, I kept watching their space for open positions. Luckily for me, the position of a public engagement officer was advertised and I applied for it. And I was fortunate to have been offered and the first person that would take on this kind of a role. I had to start from scratch as there were no precedents, which was exciting. And I saw here the opportunity to responsibly innovate and enable scientists to talk about their science and help their research reach a very heterogeneous and diverse population as it is in our country.
Sarah, I'm curious to know, in the India Alliance, as its lead for communications and public engagement, what are your main roles and responsibilities?
My role at India Alliance goes beyond making science accessible now. My current role at India Alliance spans across communicating cutting-edge science, science policy, strategy, operations and implementation, and of course, people and resource management. Let me elaborate this a bit. I oversee external communication and public engagement strategy, and this includes our external communication with stakeholders, science outreach, science communication, facilitating training workshops, etc. And based on the insights from my communication and public engagement work, I also assist the leadership in drawing organizational policies and strategy. In addition to this, I also assist the organization in developing national and international partnerships, which we hope would help strengthen the Indian biomedical research ecosystem. And that these include the leadership training workshops that we organize and the various funding models that we use to support networking, collaboration, and various other interventions. So it's an interesting mix of a lot of thinking and doing, being out in the field and spending a good amount of time on the desk as well.
Sarah, with the wide spectrum of activities that you shoulder, I really wonder what a typical workday looks like for you.
Lakshmi, there's really no typical workday. It's an incredibly dynamic lifestyle that involves a lot of travel, meetings with a whole range of people, from scientists, artists, communicators, representatives from the government, other funding organizations. It could be a school or a college principal, teachers or young children. I encounter a whole range of interactions at work. So it's hard to envision a typical day or a week at work. I could be in the field in a college or a school or engaging with the public, or I could be at my desk communicating via emails or typing away reports, or in a meeting with some of these stakeholders that I mentioned to you.
Sarah, I know you're someone that's very passionate and enthusiastic about your work and extremely driven and dynamic. Surely, from what I've seen of you, you're entirely in it. So, can you then tell us what is it that you like most about what you do?
What really keeps me going, Lakshmi, is the unpredictability and the dynamic nature of this work. The constant learning every single day keeps my neurons fired. There isn't a dull moment or a boring day. I suppose the day that I do not learn something new would be a really boring day for me. I like that I can also dip my fingers into many things, keep learning, and constantly challenge myself.
All right, now on the flip side, is there something that you do not like or wish could be better in this space?
Well, I could say because of the unpredictable nature of this job at times, I wish that things weren't as chaotic or were more systematic. I wish I had more team members. And when I have many ideas, I sometimes need to resist the temptation to do them all.
Sarah, being well rooted in the ecosystem by now, can you throw some light on what opportunities exist for graduates that might be interested in exploring this space?
Times are constantly changing, and the ecosystem has changed quite a bit from when I started and is now more and more favorable to transitions to careers beyond the bench. While India is not at par with countries like the UK and the US with respect to the non academic trajectories, we're certainly moving in the right direction and will eventually get there. I've seen a surge in the number of PhD students, for example, who want to explore other career options, and not finding them can be frustrating. So it is our responsibility to constantly advocate for these jobs because there are funds, resources, and there are talented people that can implement innovative ideas and innovate by themselves. I think we need to advocate for these careers in India, and who better than us that have found our niche along with our allies, the scientists, to advocate for these jobs in research management, communication, policy, and various other associated paths.
I couldn't agree more, Sarah. So then what skills need one acquire for science outreach?
I did not consciously train. Some traits are just inherent, and it is good to identify these from very early on. You don't necessarily have to develop them, but make good use of them in any professional career that you choose. During the course of my PhD, I identified these skills and interests and saw what roles matched. So I did that analysis, not perhaps very consciously then, but when I began looking for jobs, I would do a quick introspection to see if I'm interested in the job first. I would ask myself, do I have the skills? And even if I do not have all those skills, am I open to new learning? Really, nobody will have all the skills for a specific job, especially in this space, which is quite new and upcoming. In addition to this, entering a new career, one needs to be open to a lot of new learning on the job. When we are trained as scientists and we move into non-research fields, we tend to carry a lot of that baggage with us. And it's better not to carry that baggage when you enter a new field. You may have to do as much unlearning as you will have to learn anew. So be willing to unload some of that baggage as you begin to acquire new skills on the job. Public engagement and science communication are really broad fields in themselves, so a lot can be done depending on where your interest lies, even within this field. For engaging with the public, you will really need to have people skills to begin with. You need to be empathetic. You need to be open to ideas and feedback from the public. And as for science communication, one would have to be a good communicator to begin with, and a good writer, a rater could be someone with good multimedia skills. So identifying your skills and interests and values and matching them is very important. It's also good to stay current with the times, staying updated and constantly learning. Some skills from my training in the sciences like project management and record keeping, critical thinking, and keeping alive a spirit of inquiry and a scientific approach to solving any problems, of course, all came very handy in this role.
This is great, Sarah. Can you share any instance from your job experience where you, as you said, had to unlearn what you had learned previously or learn something new?
Yeah, there has been a lot of unlearning and learning. As a scientist, we tend to get stuck with gathering evidence as hard numbers and data. We tend to quantify the results. But I learned during public engagement that quantitative data is perhaps as important, if not more, depending on the context, as qualitative data, and that the stories are important when we're trying to build a case for something or drive across a point. In basic sciences, we hope to achieve results or see change right away, but in public engagement, where we aim to change behavior, attitude, shift in knowledge, this takes time. And finally, what public engagement also taught me is that more than relaying information to the public, it is important to seek feedback, their participation, and be in a dialogue with them rather than talk down to them. And what did I learn? At IndiaBioscience, as you know, we work with many scientists and in helping them communicate their science better to the public. A lot of time, while communicating science to the public, we tend to struggle with understanding who is the target audience and who am I pitching my science to? Is it a 10-year-old? Is it a 60-year-old? Is it someone in a city or a village? I was reading an article that came out recently in Nature that many researchers in India are communicating in native and regional languages, which is great, but even there, we need to identify who we are writing for. I think in India, we've not really determined that. The Guardian in the UK, for example, targets any science story for a 13-year-old and above. But having said that, it's also worth noting here that there isn't as much a diversity there as there is in a country such as ours. Communicating science to the audience in India is a Herculean task, as the Indian audience is hugely diverse. In public engagement, while you're in the field, you know your target audience, you are with them, so you know how to communicate with them. But when you're writing articles or producing multimedia, if we do explore this question of who we are communicating to and gain a better understanding and pitch accordingly, then we can use a plethora of these available tools to help Indian science really find its own unique voice and also broaden its voice.
Sarah, that's very well put, and it's very inspiring to see the challenges that you take on and the wonderful work that IndiaBioscience does in pushing the boundaries of Indian science and transforming the bioscience landscape. Along these lines, are there any words of career wisdom that you would want to leave our listeners with today?
I'm just going to speak from experience. I think it's important that one gets comfortable as early as possible with the idea that with a science degree, you can explore various careers and find one that truly interests you. Also, if you're sure about pursuing a non-academic career, then start preparing for your career early on. Don't wait until you submit your thesis and then start looking for something. That is what most grads do, and I really can't blame them. As most of the times, academics really seems like the default option for a science graduate.
Thank you, Sarah. All that you shared about your journey and the ecosystem was both interesting and very relevant too. I'm sure this knowledge will be useful for many as they navigate and craft their own career. As before, do look for links in the description section of this podcast on some of the public engagement work that IndiaBioscience does. I'm sure you'll find it inspiring. So do keep enjoying your science and constantly learning. See you next time with another interesting career story only on crafting your career in science. If you're passionate about scientific research, communication, outreach, and science education as we are, please connect and engage with us, and here are some ways that you can do so.
Visit our website at www.indiabioscience.org.
Subscribe to our newsletters.
Write for us and join our online discussion forum at discuss.indiabioscience.org.
Advertise jobs, grants and events in the life sciences on our website.
And feel free to contact us anytime at hello@indiabioscience.org.
Until next time, enjoy your science and stay engaged to enable change.